partners.
Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching Gulf Today on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines this hour. Eight Muslim-majority countries issue a joint statement to condemn Israel's proposal to open the Rafah border crossing exclusively for one-way exit from Gaza, warning against what they characterized as a potential forced displacement of Palestinians. Iran fires ballistic and cruise missiles at simulated targets near the Persian Gulf as a part of an exercise aimed at deterring foreign threats. The drills were reportedly carried out by Iran's Revolutionary Guards Navy in the Strait of Hormuz and Gulf of Oman. Canada removed Syria from its list of foreign state supporters of terrorism. The group Hayat Tahrir, al-Sham or HTS is no longer listed as a terrorist entity under the criminal code. Saudi Arabia's former intelligence chief says Israel has become a greater threat to regional stability than Iran, highlighting how far Riyadh apparently remains from normalizing relations with Israel. Afghan authorities say 4 civilians killed in Pakistan border clash. Local hospitals said 3 people had been discharged after suffering minor injuries during the clash. The Gulf Cooperation Council expresses deep concern over 2 proposed European Union laws on corporate sustainability, due diligence and corporate sustainability reporting, warning they could impose broad new obligations on major companies operating in the European market. Beijing and Washington hold a call to discuss bilateral trade and economic ties as issues from soybean orders to computer chips remain problematic despite the trade truce in October. China's He Lifeng holds a dialogue with Trump officials Besant and Greer. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky removes his former chief of staff Andriy Yermak from the National Security Council amid a sprawling corruption investigation that has rocked Kyiv. Yermak is also no longer a member of the Stavka, the High Command of Ukraine's armed forces, according to 2 presidential decrees. And viewers, let's move on to the top focus story here at Gulf Today on NewsX World. Now, foreign ministers from several Arab countries are expressing concern over recent Israeli remarks suggesting that the Rafah crossing be opened only in direction to transfer Gaza residents into Egypt. In a joint statement, ministers from the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Jordan, Indonesia, Pakistan, Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Qatar rejected any attempt to forcibly displace Palestinians and called for adherence to the peace plan proposed by Donald Trump, US President, which they said requires the Rafah crossing to remain open in both directions to ensure freedom of movement for Gaza's population. The statement also emphasized that the plan aims to allow Palestinians to remain on their land and participate in rebuilding their homeland while restoring stability and improving humanitarian conditions. Now, 8 Muslim-majority countries have issued this statement jointly, warning that what they call was a potential forced displacement of Palestinians. It could pose as a potential forced displacement threat to Palestinians. Now, foreign ministers of Egypt, Indonesia, Jordan, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey and UAE said in its statement expressing concern about Israeli statements regarding the opening of the crossing in a single direction that they said could aim at transferring Gaza residents to Egypt. The group also declared their absolute rejection of any attempts to expel the Palestinian people from their land. Now, viewers, remember the diplomatic pushback follows Israel's announcement that it would open the Rafah crossing from Gaza to Egypt in the coming days to allow residents to exit the Palestinian territory. Egypt, however, has immediately denied agreeing to any such agreement, and it insists the crossing must operate in both the directions. In fact, let's also tell you viewers, the 8 nations have called for crossing to be opened bi-directionally in accordance with Trump's peace plan for the region. The ministers have said that they opposed compelling any resident of the Gaza Strip to leave, framing Israel's proposal as a violation of Palestinian rights to remain on their land. Egypt and Qatar, remember, have served as primary mediators in negotiations related to the Gaza conflict, giving opposition particular weight in regional diplomatic efforts. Now, reopening the Rafah crossing represents a key component of Donald Trump's peace plan for Gaza, and it has long been sought by UN agencies and humanitarian organizations alike who are seeking to deliver aid and facilitate the civilian movement. The crossing has remained largely closed, creating severe restrictions on movement in and out of the besieged territory. In fact, despite the ceasefire in October took effect, as Israeli authorities have delayed implementing the crossing reopening. Officials there have cited Hamas's failure to return the bodies of all hostages, as well as the need for a proper coordination with authorities in Egypt before the proceedings. The Rafah crossing has emerged as a critical point of contention in post-ceasefire agreements. The border passage serves as Gaza's primary connection to Egypt and the world beyond Israeli-controlled crossings. Humanitarian groups as well have pressed for its reopening to alleviate the directions and the dire conditions facing Gaza's people. Another statement coming from the 8 nations have signaled growing regional concern that Israel's one-way proposal could facilitate permanent displacement of Palestinians rather than temporary humanitarian movement. It was on Wednesday when Israel had announced that it would open the Rafah crossing from Gaza to Egypt, and now a statement has come in from these 8 nations that, I repeat, include Egypt, Indonesia, Jordan, Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and the United Arab Emirates. And joining me in this bulletin is Mr. Kapar Wasser of the Israeli Intelligence and Security Agency's expert. Thank you, Mr. Kapar Wasser, for joining us here at NewsX World. Appreciate you giving us time. Do you really view this proposal by Israel as a potential threat for permanent displacement of the Palestinians?
Not at all. Good morning. This is totally wrong to look at it as something that has to do with expelling the Palestinians from Gaza. It's what is at stake is the ability of Palestinians to leave Gaza if they need to for all kinds of reasons, and that's what Israel is allowing them to do. If there's no restriction on them coming back when they finish doing whatever they want to do outside of Gaza, and that's all the story. It's not about forcing anybody out of Gaza.
But what about the statement that has been issued from these 8 countries, and also the concerns that are coming from the humanitarian groups in providing aid to the region?
Well, I understand their concern. They are worried that this will lead to something like calling on the Palestinians to leave. That's not what we are up to. The Palestinians, most of the Palestinians live in the areas, in this part of Gaza that is ruled by Hamas, and whether they leave or not is dependent on Hamas' decision. And we are not telling anybody to leave. And the same with the humanitarian aid. The humanitarian aid is flowing without any problem from our side. It's We are all worried about the fact that Hamas steals much of the humanitarian aid coming into the territories ruled by the organization, by this terror organization. But we allow the flow of aid inside Gaza without any interruption.
But why were the crossings not opened bi-directionally as was proposed by Trump's peace plan for the region?
We are not yet there. We are still at phase one of the agreement. In phase one, the most important thing is bringing back the hostages. And fortunately, all the living hostages were released, and most of the bodies were brought back too. And we are still missing one body of a hostage, and we are waiting for that to happen. And then we should be able to move to stage two of the plan, in which one of the things that is going to happen is the opening of the Rafah crossing. For the time being, we open it only for those who really need to move out.
All right, do stay on with us, Mr. Kaparwasser. I also request your comments on another interesting development now coming in. Viewers, let's tell you that Iran's Revolutionary Guards Navy has now fired both ballistic and cruise missiles at simulated targets in the Gulf during a two-day military exercise that was aimed at countering what Tehran calls foreign threats. State media say the drills follow the 12-day air war between Israel and Iran earlier this year, during which the United States joined Israel in striking Iranian nuclear sites. Before the naval drills, Iran hosted an anti-terrorism exercise in East Azerbaijan province alongside the members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, describing it as a message of peace to neighboring states and a warning that any miscalculation would trigger a decisive response. On Friday, Iranian forces conducted a massive launch of QADR-110, Qadr-380 and Qadr-360 cruise missiles along with 303 ballistic missiles striking targets in the Gulf of Oman. Drones also hit simulated enemy bases, and the Revolutionary Guards Navy began the operation Thursday in the strategic Strait of Hormuz and throughout the Gulf of Oman. Listen in to what General Ali Reza Tangsari, the commander of the IRGC Navy, had to say.
مردم ایران بدونن ما با دشمن هیچ تعارفی نداریم. بی تعارف اگر بخوان تعدی کنن به داشته‌های این ملت، به آن چیزی که شهدا به دست ما دادن، منافع کشور ما رو تعدی کنن، قطعا تو دهنی میخورن.
And I now request Mr. Kaparwasser to join us back in the discussion here. Mr. Kaparwasser, how do you see Iran now displaying its missile power in the region?
Well, I think, first of all, it tells us a lot that Iran is still the major threat to stability in the Middle East, and they are still building the capability in order to destabilize the area and promote their radical approach to what the Middle East should look like. And at the same time, they are worried because they are totally exposed after the war in June. And everybody understands that they don't have the capability to protect themselves. And they realize that if they resume their activities in the nuclear realm, this may cause Israel and the United States to take action. So they are very worried. And on top of that, they are under a lot of pressure because of the economic situation and the water problems that they suffer from. So all in all, they're trying to deter any potential threat to them and threaten that they might escalate if their concerns are not going to be considered positively by the international community. And what happens is just the opposite. We saw the snapback of the sanctions, and we saw much more pressure put on them by the West. So they are considering, amongst all kinds of options, the option of escalation. And for that purpose, they need more capabilities, more military capabilities. And they are working on that. They are producing more missiles, and they are showing off their missile capability, which is the major asset they still have.
All right. I thank you, Mr. Kaparwasser, for giving your opinion on that. And with that, viewers, we now move on. Now, the Canadian government has said that Canada has removed Syria from its list of foreign state supporters of terrorism and removed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the group that spearheaded the rebel alliance that helped oust President Bashar al-Assad from its list of terrorist entities. The government also said that these measures are in line with the recent decisions taken by Canada's allies, including the United Kingdom and the United States, and follows the efforts by the Syrian transitional government to advance Syria's stability and build an inclusive and secure future for its citizens, to work alongside global partners to reinforce regional stability and counter terrorism. And I would now welcome Peter Baum, editor of the Weekly Blitz, into the discussion here. He joins us live from Syria. Thank you, Peter, for joining us here at NewsX World. Now, Canada has removed Syria from its list of terror supporting states, of course, in line with what the US had previously done. How do you see these measures being announced?
Yeah, good day to you. Canada never takes the lead in anything these days. She's what we would call a fast follower. And having seen the Trump administration and the Starmer administration in the United Kingdom make the first move, she has simply followed on the tailcoats of these two more influential countries. Canada these days, geopolitically, has very, very little influence. So she's just fallen in line. However, it's a further kick in the teeth to Russia, who, if they thought had any chance of reintroducing Assad or Assad's followers as an influence in Syria, they've now well and truly put paid to that. And the fact that this group were formerly a terrorist group and were formally and did formally break all the rules of international law seems to have made no difference to the political activists who are now running the show. So it's diplomatically, it's a very big win for the current Syrian regime. And I must say, they have played this with a straight bat and very, very carefully and with diplomatic nous that no one would have suspected when they first came to power. They have been very shrewd in how they've gone forward on the diplomacy front. So it's a win for them, a kick in the teeth for Russia, but Canada actually following in line with the US and UK, probably expected, but in itself would have no great influence other than to be seen as a diplomatic win for the current Syrian regime and another a defeat for the Russians and the former Assad regime.
All right, but what is driving this move by Canada? I'm asking especially because while Hayat Tahrir al-Sham has been removed from this list, 56 other entities in Syria and 225 individuals still continue to be in the list.
Yes, now it would be interesting to see if going forward how the US and the United Kingdom react to those further individuals and groups. We don't know yet, but at the moment, the Syrian regime, bit by bit, and actually quite expeditiously, I must say, is gaining ground on the diplomatic front. And as I've said to you just now, this is another win for them. I think Canada in itself won't do anything to put their head above the parapet and decide on one way or another on any of the other groups of individuals. They will wait for what the US and the United Kingdom does. And at the moment, it seems, if the Syrian regime continue to do what they're doing on the diplomatic front, they're going to have further successes, undoubtedly.
All right. Thank you, Peter, for giving your perspective on that. But do stay on. I'd like you to give your comment on another development now coming in from Saudi Arabia, where former intelligence chief Prince Turki Al-Faisal has said that Israel has become a greater threat to regional stability than Iran. speaking at the Milken Institute's Middle East and Africa Summit in Abu Dhabi, the influential royal Saudi said that for the moment, definitely it is Israel, pointing to Israel's near daily strikes in Syria and its ongoing military actions in Gaza, the West Bank, and the Lebanon as well. Prince Turki suggested Iran's regional influence has weakened, citing Hezbollah's diminished position in Lebanon and political changes in Syria. He also referenced Washington's recent strike on Iran's nuclear facilities, saying it has further limited Tehran's reach. The prince argued that Israel's expanding military operations are not a harbinger of peace and called the country the troublemaker that must be reined in. All right. I'd now request Peter to join us back in this discussion here. Peter, interesting the position that Saudi Arabia is taking against Israel, also when it is one of the 8 nations who have condemned Israel's unidirectional opening of the Rafah crossing.
Yeah, Prince Turkey, though an ex-intelligence chief, is still very influential in Saudi circles. And it's interesting that this one statement has been selected to highlight what was a much broader speech. And I could have easily selected other comments from that speech, which would have given put Israel in a more positive light. But nevertheless, this is the way the global media reacts. And let's look at what he said. Now, my contacts in the Middle East who are at this institute, at this meeting at the moment, have called, I've spoken to them just before we came on air, and the feedback is somewhat a little bit more nuanced. Saudi Arabia is one of those countries that recognizes that the biggest threat to the region is not Israel, but is Iran, but didn't say so at this summit. Now, why? And it's quite easy to understand. Other countries in the region, Muslim Arab countries, that have made, let's say, a tenuous peace with Israel, such as Egypt, Jordan, Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, Morocco, Azerbaijan, for example, have all managed over the last few years and more recently to persuade their domestic audiences by how they've changed their education system, that Israel is not the pariah state in the region that for decades all Muslim countries indoctrinated generations of children that she was. Saudi Arabia has not yet managed to achieve that objective through her education system. She still has a domestic audience that is still quite anti-Israel. Now, 10 years ago, that would have been 100% of her domestic audience. At the moment, it's probably more like 80%, but there's still a great deal of work to be done, and we will continue to see, let's say, anti-Israeli comments from very influential members of the Saudi government and royal family until such time as Saudi Arabia manages to ensure that at least over half its domestic audience is on the same wavelength as the domestic audiences are in those countries that I've mentioned. Now, she is trying. Unfortunately, I'm not sure whether the Trump administration, who would love Saudi to become a part of the Abraham Accords, recognizes that it's through the education system that allows these countries to be more pro-friendly towards the Israeli cabinet, whether it's a Netanyahu cabinet or a more left-wing one. And those are the reasons why we will continue to see certain negative comments from influential members of the Saudi regime until such time as they feel confident that they have won over the domestic audience to the political level that they want them to be.
All right. Thank you, Peter, for speaking to us for now. And with that, as we move on to tell you that Pakistan and Afghanistan have been exchanging heavy fire along their border amid heightened tension following failed peace talks earlier this week. Afghan Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid says that Pakistani forces launched attacks in Spin Buldak district of Kandahar province, which has killed over 4 people. Meanwhile, a spokesman for Pakistan's Prime Minister accused Afghan forces of unprovoked firing along the Chaman border. The exchange came 2 days after a new round of peace talks between the South Asian neighbors ended without a breakthrough. Both sides agreed to continue their fragile ceasefire. At the heart of the dispute, Islamabad has accused Afghan-based militants of carrying out recent attacks in Pakistan, including the suicide bombings involving Afghan nationals. And that's a wrap on Gulf Today. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.